we're pretty close to being able to capture the criterion of morality according to Mill. And I'm first going to give you a principle that's almost Mill's criterion of morality. And if we think about it, first we got to figure out what kind of utility do you need? Do you have to have a positive utility? Well, that's probably not going to work out because sometimes all the alternatives are going to be bad choices, but one is by far the best choice. And certainly expecting that there's going to be no negative things isn't realistic. But it seems that this is what I'm going to call almost AU for act utilitarianism. That is, act utilitarianism being a version of utilitarianism that I'm attributing to John Stuart Mill. And that is that an action is right if and only if it has the highest utility of all the alternatives. That is, you're faced with a set of alternatives, what to do, and what makes an action right is that it has the highest utility. Now, we could imagine situations where there are a lot, and in fact, I'll come up with one that there are going to be three choices, but two of them are going to be tied. For example, let's say you have one piece of candy or one lollipop, and you have two little kids, and really you want to do something nice to either. I mean, you could there are three things you could do. You could give it to the first child, you could give it to the second child, or eat it yourself or throw it out, whatever the third alternative is. Now, it seems pretty clear in this case you don't have the other piece of candy or lollipop. You can't get another one. It seems either giving it to the first child or giving it to the second child, probably the right thing to do in this case. The only problem is the utility is going to be tied, right? Because the difference is which child gets the lollipop, and we're going to assume that it's by far better that one gets rather than nobody gets it. So that's going to be a little bit problematic. But the way to work that out is to say, in cases of ties, either of the action that's tied for the highest utility is a right action, morally permissible. And it gets a little complicated. So in cases several alternatives are tied, the alternative that has the highest, that's tied for the highest utility is right. So I think we can characterize now the fundamental principle of morality, the criterion of morality for act utilitarianism as, and here comes AUs for act utilitarianism, an action is right if and only if no other action that the agent could have done instead has a higher utility. And I think this is Mill's theory. Perhaps you've taken other courses where people like to talk about the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and I think there are questions of how you interpret that. That is, if you have one person that it creates a tremendous amount of pleasure for and is neutral, versus a case where you have many, many people who are caused very little pleasure by it. What's the deciding factor? How do you decide? What's the greatest good for the greatest number? How do you distribute it? Is that really the right principle? I think the easiest way to understand it, especially when you see what Mill says about it, is that it's the action, an action's right just in case, if and only if it has at least as high a utility as any alternative. Now, it's kind of hard to see how we apply it, but let's go through one example, and it'll give us a good idea about the intention of how this is supposed to be applied, this criterion of morality.